before we get to your questions, we have samples, and Fred, bad guy.
This is a fun one, I think, but a bad guy. Yeah, this is a tomato fruit worm, and here we see it tunnels into the fruit. You can see like this, it's plenty alive and happy. I'm just going to take my knife really quickly. It also has blossom end rot, Kevin.
It is. I thought you were going to slice the caterpillar.
I did too.
Oh, I might do that later. And this is what it does
Ew.
to the interior. So this is really an interesting caterpillar. It goes by many names depending on what crop it's on. In this case, we call it a tomato fruit worm. But if it's on cotton, it's a cotton bollworm. If it's on soybean, it's a soybean podworm. If it's on corn, it is the infamous corn earworm. So again, it has a lot of host plants and affects many of our garden vegetables and of course our field crops. So one of the nasty ones. The problem is that by the time that you see the damage, you see the hole, it's already moved in, it's done the damage. As they feed, they allow for the introduction of all the pathogens, and we end up with a nasty thing that looks like this. So tomato fruit worm on tomato, but corn earworm for the rest of us.
All right, thanks, Fred. All right, Rock, something that I think is pretty exciting because I didn't know this existed, actually.
Well, and I've had it on the show before, but I probably didn't cover it as depth as I want. There are products on the market. Those of you that like to get out in the garden or hike or that kind of thing, poison ivy can be a serious problem for those people that are hypersensitive. So there's products called Ivy Block or IVX, and Ivy Block is basically exactly what the name implies, is that this is a product you put on as a preventative before you go out and potentially could get into poison ivy, right? Or poison oak or poison sumac, any of the poisonous topical oil-based plants, right? So this is kind of cool. You put it on before you go out, and in so that case, you're kind of thinking that it's there. It also is packaged, at least IVX, as a pre-contact wet and dry kind of thing, and you put this on. But the one I really like is this IVX cleanser. So you're out, you didn't know you were going to run into this stuff, you get it on your hands, you get it, whatever, and you're out hiking or doing whatever you're doing, you've got this in your pocket and you wipe it off because you've got a very water-insoluble compound that the plant emits, and then you get it on your skin. So you wipe it off or whatever part of your body maybe you get it on. So I don't care whether you're a biker or you're out biking and you get into the woods or with mountain bikes or whatever, or you're just walking, this is the perfect thing, or if you're physically in the garden. So it's kind of a general purpose thing, but I really think this cleanser is a great idea, and it works really, really well. So that said, there's a lot of possibilities here. Now I want to tell you where you might be able to get this. If you Google search IVX or Google search Ivy Block, but let's talk about IVX because their website is really well done. It's kind of funny because I typed it in today just because I hadn't talked about this in a while, and I'm not hypersensitive, so I don't put it on when I go out into the woods. But I got online and I found it, and the price was like $900. I went, holy cow, Batman. That's a little bit pricey to pay for this stuff. But then I found out that was like if you were buying a case of 1,000 of these little towelettes. So don't be shocked when you see the price. If you go to Amazon.com, it'll cost you about $18 for something like this. And you may say that's pricey, but the other option is to look pink with calamine after you've been out in the woods. So preferentially, I would go with this stuff, especially for those of you that are really hypersensitive, because some people can just puff up like a balloon. So let's not do that. Let's have fun. Let's be safe out there.
And I would be one of those puffer fish if I didn't have that in my pocket.
Then I'm keeping this close to me so you don't take it home with you.
All right.
Spend the $800. Buy the case of towelettes.
Excellent. All right, Kevin, what did you bring tonight?
All right, tonight I have corn smut. And this is corn smut on a sweet corn stalk. This is a fungal disease. Fungus can get inside the plant and move pretty much anywhere inside the plant. So you can have these galls, or these fruiting bodies, produced on the stalks, on the leaves, on the tassels, and on the ears. We commonly see them on the ears, but they can show up on any of the vegetated above ground parts of the plant. Excuse me. As the name implies, it's very common. We get it every year. The seeds are blown around. It's hard to prevent. The thing you can do is just pay attention to your spacing in the garden. If you increase airflow to help reduce the moisture that sits around on the leaves and on the stalks throughout the night, you can help reduce the amount of infection. And you also want to try to avoid damage. to the stalk, to the ears. This particular fungus tends to take over and sporulate on the damaged parts of the plant. So we often see it pop up sometimes after a hail event. So you might want to look at it, look for it in your corn after a hail event. Another interesting fact about this particular fungus is that it's actually a delicacy. It started off in Mexico. I think they eat it at different places around the world now, but it's called huitlacoche. And it's a fungus, so it's just like eating, your mushrooms. They have found out that this particular fungus, once it takes over the plant cell tissues, produces a lot of lysine. So if you eat this, it's actually super healthy. It's even healthier than the corn that it's attacking. And in some niche markets, it can sell for a good price. So in fact, it can sell for more than an ear of corn. So we might start producing huitlacoche in Nebraska. Rock, what do you think?
It's in southern New Mexico, where I'm from, you would see it all the time for sale. And if you went down into Mexico, which was like a 35-mile drive, we'd go in and buy it at the store and heat it up and put it over meat, or even just by itself on potatoes. It was amazing. So I think corn smut is sometimes better than a bad ear of corn. And I would recommend it. If you can get a hold of it, do it. It's I don't know how you would process a chunk of it, and it's not real appetizing. So I don't know if you could peel this off and pop it in your mouth. But that said, there's got to be a way to get some, and you should try the corn smut. It's amazing.
Cool. All right. Sarah, you also captured something, I believe, out of our garden.
Yes, I did. I visited the Backyard Farmer Garden and brought a sample along with me tonight. And this is one of the All-America Selection releases for this year. And this is a new canna called South Pacifica Scarlet, which is kind of unique. It's one of the dwarf cannas, so this one only gets to be about 3 feet tall, maybe just a little over 3 feet tall with the flower heads, and a beautiful kind of a coral red color on the flowers. I didn't take the largest flower head that was in the garden, and some of them were quite a bit bigger than this one, so they are actually very showy and would be a very nice addition to a garden. The thing that really makes this plant unique, though, is that this is a seed-propagated canna. Most of the cannas that you buy, from garden centers or mail order, come to you either as a root section or they're propagated via the roots. But this one is actually grown from seed. And our master gardeners who actually take care of the master gardener or the Backyard Farmer Garden started these from seed this spring. And they were talking about really how easy it was to get them going, so it wasn't a terribly difficult process. So this is a really very, very nice plant to add a nice focal point in the garden, or if you need something in kind of that mid-range, 3-foot height range to add just a splash of color. This would be a very, very nice plant to think about for next year.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah. And anybody who wants to can go see the whole planting in the Backyard Farmer Garden. All right, Fred, you get the first picture. This is really a fun one. This person sent us a picture of this insect. He said they're all over the yard, and the holes are a little bigger than a pencil, and he's seen them eat ants. And for our viewers, they're seeing the eyes, aren't they?
What you're doing, you're seeing there's a hole in the ground that's, maybe a half an inch in diameter, and looking out of that, you're seeing the face of this insect. And the eyes initially looked like a fly, so we really went back and forth on this one. It turns out it's a wasp. It's mostly in western areas, but they've been reported from Fontenelle Forest, so in eastern Nebraska. And it's called the green-eyed wasp, not surprisingly. And actually, they're predators on grasshoppers, katydids, other orthopteran insects. So this wasp would go out, track down a little grasshopper, bring it back, sting it, paralyze it, go back take it down into that little burrow and lay its egg, and then fly out and then find another burrow, dig another burrow. They're really good diggers. Sometimes they're called digger wasps or sand wasps, okay? So let's talk about control. They're only going to be there for a fairly short period of time. These are solitary wasps. They are not aggressive. So unless you actually pick it up, it's not going to bother you. So just sort of leave it alone. If there are so many that they're really causing a problem with humans or animals, you could spray them with a little 7, with a little bit of carbaryl. I mean, it would kill them very easily, but I would really hope that you wouldn't have to do that, because it's truly part of nature's wondrous pageantry.
And I don't believe in all the years I've been hosting we've ever seen that one.
Nope.
So
In fact, I've never seen this wasp in person, so it's,
neat.
it's really a cool one.
all right, excellent. Thanks to that viewer for sending us that. Rock, your very favorite turf. This is a viewer who sent us a picture of Zoysia that died last year in the drought. So that's Zoysia grass that is dead. She had a couple of questions. First, is it possible to reseed into the Zoysia and or to get rid of it by, can she remove those remnants of the dead and go back to something that is not Zoysia? What would you recommend?
Okay, first off, I'm not really sad to see the Zoysia dead, but I wouldn't say that it's dead. Unfortunately, Zoysia has this great capacity to regenerate. We've dug up rhizomes that are 18 inches in the ground that have propagated. So I'm not convinced that you can go in and overseed with one of the more preferred species like tall fescue or Kentucky bluegrass and not end up with patchy Zoysia, which you want to avoid. So the reality of it is that it died or appears to be dead, and she mentioned that it may be the drought. I believe you said something about the drought. But the other thing is it could be chinch bugs, and I'll flip it back to Fred because chinch bugs can be devastating on Zoysia grass and buffalo grass. So I'll flip it back to him when I'm done. I'm not convinced that it's all dead. And I'm convinced if you tried to overseed it, you're going to get these patches of Zoysia, and it's going to look like those horrendous lawns that we see over Lincoln in the spring with the little patches of brown nothing, which is the Zoysia, right? So realistically, you can't remove those patches, probably can't get all the rhizomes out. So I would lightly cultivate that entire area, put down some fertilizer. If you want to put down some perennial ryegrass yet this fall, just to green it up, and then next spring, let the ryegrass die with the drought. I would imagine that you're going to see 80 to 90% recovery from the stolons and the rhizomes of that Zoysia. Even if you only got 20% recovery, you're going to immediately not be able to put in a cool season grass. The ryegrass will kind of die out on its own. Start mowing it, fertilize it, treat it like you should treat Zoysia on our website, turf.unl.edu. A shout out to Zach Riker and Wendy Morrissey for the great job they do on that website. But once again, turf.unl.edu has some really good information on all the grasses, including Zoysia. So start maintaining it, and it'll probably recover well beyond your expectations. So I'd do a light cultivation, like I said, fertilize, and go for it. It's probably not going to do much yet this year, but there's going to be some recovery next year that I think you'll be amazed at.
All right.
Unless, of course, they have chinch bugs is the problem. So one, like buffalo grass, Zoysia grass, has chinch bug issues. And so if you started to see dying in little patches, that kind of expanded and then coalesced together, it could have been chinch bugs. And if chinch bugs kill it, they will still be in the perimeter areas that's still living, and so you need to want to take care of that infestation. Right now, chinch bugs are at a time when they can be treated. An application of something like bifenthrin would be Telstar commercially. One application should pretty much take care of it. But what you want to do is go to those perimeter areas, the peripheral areas where you got some live, some dead, and just take a handful up and tap it out into a pan or on a plate and see if you see any little chinch bugs. If that's the case, then treat it to ensure that Zoysia grass can come back.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, Kevin, you have a question from a York viewer who has issues with their beans. I want to know what it is and what they can do about it.
Yeah, that looks like, given the kind of the circular pattern on the pods of the lesion, on the pods, it looks like anthracnose to me. It's consistent with the leaf lesions I'm seeing as well. What I would recommend doing for a positive diagnosis is just opening up the pod, getting a bean out, and seeing if the lesion is on the bean as well. Anthracnose will infect through the pod and onto the bean. Plus, if you have a hand lens or some kind of magnifying device, anthracnose oftentimes produces these acervuli, these little black fingers in the middle of those lesions. So if those are present, that's probably what it is. Unfortunately, at this time of year, infection's pretty heavy, and the beans look like they're pretty well developed. So there's not a lot you can do now. If you're growing this in the garden and you plan on beans in the same location next year, you might want to consider moving that location, or just making sure you rake up and remove all the plants this year.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Sarah, this is an Auburn viewer who has a strawberry bed. It's in a raised bed. It's the third year for this particular planting. It isn't ever bearing. It has some issues that are perhaps in your bailiwick, and maybe might fall to Kevin a little bit as well, but they're wondering what they can do to prevent this in the future. That's the primary question.
Well, it looks like there definitely is some leaf dieback here in the planting, and it looks like possibly there might be some disease issues going on there. There may also just be some management issues, and just checking to make sure that you're doing all the good management practices on strawberries, keeping them well watered when it's dry, making sure that you're renovating. Even with an everbearing strawberry, you do need to renovate periodically so that your plants don't get too crowded. And then the overcrowding can result in additional leaf spot issues. So definitely renovation is something you want to take a look at. But I think there might be some other issues there too.
It's possible. I'd say renovation and sanitation too. Just again, this is a fungus. If it is a fungal leaf blight, it's gonna stick around in the greenhouse, or is it in a greenhouse?
It's in a raised bed.
In raised beds. It's going to stick around in that residue. So maybe even getting some new soil, or just trying to remove all the plant material that you can if you're going to plant strawberries back into there, because the fungus is going to come back from those bits of plant material still left in the soil.
All right, thanks, guys. Fred, you have a viewer from Haydar, Nebraska, who had grape clusters that they were going to cut, and they came across this little thing on the vine, and I think our viewers can see it over there by the board. It's a prickly-looking thing.
Yeah, those are insect galls, and in fact, those are caused by a tiny gnat-like insect called a gall midge. And again, the midge lays its eggs in the stem. In this case, sometimes they're in the leaves, and those eggs hatch, and the developing larvae produce those little conical-shaped galls. They won't cause any harm to the plant. They won't spread. It was a one-shot incident, so wouldn't worry about them. Just sort of enjoy them, but not a problem. Now, we see galls on other plants that can reach numbers that cause some problems, but grape gall midge isn't one of them.
Great, thanks, Fred. Rock, I know that you guys have had a lot of questions about goosegrass. And so we thought maybe we should show a picture of it for people and then talk about how to control it.
Sure, that's the grass in the center, just to the right, obviously, of the golf ball. And basically, you get that white rosette in the center. It's a warm season annual, much like crabgrass or foxtail, et cetera. The trouble is it can tolerate extremely low mowing. So when you look at it, it's basically growing under tight mowing conditions. It generally shows up in lawns that are a little on the thin side, so probably the first thing to do is get that stand up and growing a little more aggressively, or it's in very compacted sites. So aeration from a cultural standpoint, aeration and possibly some overseeding may be required just because those sites are thin. Probably aeration is the one to go the best. There's really no post-control that consumers can buy that's very effective on goosegrass, especially when it gets to that size. And pretty soon we're going to start seeing the seed head, which essentially looks like a zipper on there. You want to make sure that you keep it mowed or get it out of there before that. But right now, chemical control is probably not recommended nor going to be very effective. So in those thin areas where you can physically see it, hand weeding or hand pulling. If it's a big area, that's obviously maybe next to impossible. But you're still going to have some resident seed there. So next year, consider a pre-emergent Scott's Halts or similar pendimethalin-based products, that sort of thing. So you throw that into the equation, you'll get some or good or better control with that pre-emergent in the spring of the year if you apply it later rather than earlier. So rather than the mid-April that's been recommended, or even late April, consider the first or second week of May.
All right, thanks, Rock. Kevin, we had a lot of questions about spruce earlier in the spring, so now we have one now. This viewer is 10 miles north of Kearney, and I think they've sent 2 or 3 pictures here. They're saying that tips are turning from the blue of the new growth to a lightish purple. So whether that is a disease issue or whether we're environmental, do you have any suggestions for them on this one?
Yeah, I'm not. If the purple turns to brown, then we need to worry. But the biggest thing I see from the first photo that was shown was actually the new candles are kind of the healthy blue color that you need, and then the older needles looked like they were a bit darker green, and then towards the bottom of the plant there looked like there was some needles towards the inside of the plant that were brown and dying. So that actually looks to me quite a bit like Rhizospora needle cast. That particular fungus can't infect the new emerging candles. It can only infect the needles that were put on last year. So So what it looks like, it could also be transplant stress. It looked like it was recently transplanted. There are some products that can be applied to prevent rhizosphaera. They need to be applied in the spring, though, when those candles are emerging. So I would just continue to take good care of the tree. If it's dry this winter and the ground is not frozen, you need to keep watering the trees if it's dry.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Sarah, we have a viewer who sent us a picture of what appears to be a watermelon until it gets sliced open, and they wonder what it is and what they can do with it.
Well, you know, actually, the most common flesh color we see for watermelon is the pink or the red, but white is a genetic flesh color for watermelons too, along with yellow, which maybe is a little more common to the home gardener, and then also an orangey color. So this is probably a naturally occurring flesh color for this particular melon. Now, how did it get in your garden? If you didn't plant a white fleshed watermelon, it could be that this is a volunteer from a seed that came out of plants you grew last year. You know, when you get genetic recombination in hybrid cultivars, and then those seeds grow out the following year, you can get all sorts of really odd, different combinations appearing. Now, if you didn't grow watermelons in this spot last year, you know, then it could be that something weird happened. If this was a transplant you bought, or if it was seed that you bought, you know, maybe there's something odd that happened in the production fields where the watermelon seed was produced. But, you know, I think this is kind of interesting, so I would taste it. I would go ahead and give it a try and see how it tastes. If it might be slightly different than the red fleshed watermelons, but I think it would be worth a try.
Okay, Fred, this is a Hastings viewer who has a small white worm inside the raspberries, and the fruits are mushy. Small white worm.
If it's a maggot, that might be, depends how small it is, it might be spotted wing Drosophila. It's a new invasive pest. It came from the West Coast. It's been now found in Michigan, and now we have it in 4 counties. It's one of the fruit flies, but it feeds on fresh fruit and berry, raspberry, apple. I mean, all sorts of our fruit plants. So
we'll want
you know,
to talk
that
about
might be
that.
worth taking to the extension office, having them take a look, because we're trying. Where did we say that was from?
Hastings.
Hastings. So
Yeah, so
we know they're found in Adams County.
Okay, thanks, Fred. All right, Rock, can Scott's pre-emergence be used in the fall if this person bought a spring formulation?
Sure, just remember it's probably got nitrogen. Not all Scott's products, Halt's products have nitrogen, but if this one has nitrogen, make sure you don't double apply. We certainly don't want to over apply the nitrogen, and they'll work fine. Actually, timing is about now. Okay. You want to get that down now, because a lot of those winter annuals are going to start popping up, and you know, as they go into the winter, they're much more prevalent. So now into the first couple of weeks of September, put it down, water it in just like you would in the fall.
Okay,
It's going to be in the spring.
Kevin, we're still seeing piles and piles of Stinkhorn fungus. Should people do anything other than
I don't know what they can do.
kick them over?
Yeah, just remove them if you find them unsightly. There's really, you know, there's nothing we can apply to the soil that's going to get rid of them.
And you can't eat stinkhorns.
You should not eat stinkhorns.
Yeah, exactly.
Only the flies eat.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a reason they attract the flies.
Sarah, a Blair viewer, wants to know how you can tell when a watermelon is ready to pick.
You know, where the watermelon lays on the ground, there's usually kind of a white spot. And when the melon's getting ready to be harvested, that white spot turns kind of a creamy yellow color. So that's one of the things that I would look for. And then also, if you kind of thump them with your finger, they'll start to get a real hollow sound inside when they're getting close to ripeness. And then one last little trick, you can look at the tendril closest to the watermelon, and usually if that is turning brown, then the watermelon is close to ripe.
All right, Fred, you get a picture here, and this is from Violet and Lily, who are 6 and 3.
Oh, wow.
And they had a visitor.
Beautiful.
They want to know what it is, and they think it's a moth of some kind.
It's one of the sphinx moths. It looks to me it's either a Pandora sphinx or a Achaemen. Probably an Achaemen sphinx moth. They look fairly similar. Again, it's you know, the caterpillars feed on things like bindweed and grape, and don't usually cause a lot of damage. So yeah, Achaemen sphinx moth.
Wonderful. Rock, we have a
Future entomologist too.
North Platte viewer
forbid.
who wants to know whether they've got nimblewill. It had been identified as barnyard grass, and will tenacity control it?
I'm pretty confident that's not barnyard grass. The width of the leaf is not good, and then the presence of a stolon or a little piece of rhizome on those pictures indicates to me that that's probably not barnyard, and it could possibly be nimblewill. It could also be Bermuda grass. We don't have that's a good picture for most of the characteristics. Need something a little bit closer up. So they want to clearly identify it, send it in. We'll take a look at it, send it into the diagnostic clinic. The other thing is that if it is nimblewill, then tenacity can work. It's the common name is mesotrione, and it can spray down. You're a little bit late to really get great control. You would knock it back some, and then you might get some effective winter control because the plant is injured. But really, you want that when the nimblewill is aggressively growing, and right now it's already kicking into the days are getting shorter and it's starting to slow down its growth. So you get some control, probably in the 40 to 50% range, but a midsummer and then an additional treatment 4 weeks after that will generally knock it down. But right now you're probably not going to get the control you want. Make sure it's nimblewill before you start spraying the mesotrione though.
All right, thanks, Rock. We have a viewer with really strange cucumbers, Kevin. Any idea on this particular one?
Well, the two on the left make me think it could be something like it's zucchini yellow mosaic virus. We'll put scars on the fruit like that, and if you have it in association with cucumber mosaic virus, it can really exacerbate the symptoms. But you look at the cucumber on the right, and it's almost completely stripped of its outer wall. So interesting. I don't know if it's a physiological disorder. It could be a viral issue. We would tend to see some symptoms in the leaves as well if it were viral, and it looked like the leaves were fine. So in terms of pathogen,
Bring you one.
Yeah, I would need maybe a sample in the clinic to look at. Otherwise, I'm thinking it's a physiological disorder.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Sarah, a viewer wants to know why the tops of tomatoes crack, and there would be a picture of it.
Yeah, cracking like this is very common in late season tomatoes, and it's almost always caused by too much water following a dry period. So we have dry periods in summer, and then we get a big rain, or the gardener does a lot of watering, and we get this type of cracking. Either cracking that comes down the sides or cracking that goes around the top of the tomato are both caused by that.
All right, Fred, you have actually an image of the insect that you might have just talked about with the raspberries. So this is your next picture. And what is it, and what do we do about it?
Okay, that's the infamous spotted wing. See that? Drosophila, a fruit fly, and that's what I suspected might be going on in the raspberry in Hastings that we just talked about a little bit earlier. Again, this is an invasive pest. It was on the West Coast, and it was in Michigan in 2010, and now we've identified it. We found it and confirmed it, 4 counties in Nebraska. So we're concerned. At this point, there's not much that folks can do because it's basically indistinguishable from all the other fruit flies that are invading your compost pile and your house. And right now, that little spot is what's diagnostic on them. So, but one thing you can do, they feed on overripe fruit. So if you have fruit, apples, or whatever that's dropped, you could pick those up and eliminate those, put them on the compost pile, I suppose, or dispose of them.
All right. Thanks, Fred. That's
Spotted wing
scary.
fruit fly, you'll be hearing more about this one.
All right, thanks, Fred. Rock, we have a couple of images of some heat stress traffic damage showing up now, and the question is what to do.
Well, the first thing from these pictures is that if the turf is drought stressed, guess what? Don't drive on it. Don't mow it. I mean,
Right.
if it's drought stressed, what are you picking up when you mow it? So you want to avoid traffic on drought stressed turf, and that's these are perfect examples of that. On dehydrated turf, then you want to cross it, crush it even more. It's recover. It will recover. I mean, and by this fall, you're going to see those lines pretty much gone. But avoid traffic on that drought-stressed turf. And this sort of goes hand in glove with what Jeff was talking about. And I just want to kind of add to that is that the water restrictions, which we needed to do last year in Lincoln and to some degree in Omaha and some of the smaller communities. When you've got trees planted, not how we would recommend, you've got trees within the turf area. So when we restrict water, of course, they don't water the lawns, and people tend to forget that the tree roots are way up into that lawn, so they're not getting water either. So Jeff did a really nice job, and he showed examples where the trees were zoned, what we call zoned, and that's a great thing. But most of our lawns aren't like that, and there's a tree stuck in the middle or whatever. So understand that when you quit watering the lawn, the lawn is going to suffer. But usually we get, like this year, we had some drought dryers. The tree's going to suffer more. And then when we shut our irrigation systems off, the tree's not done, so we need to get water there. So don't depend on the irrigation from a sprinkler system in the ground to do the work you need on the trees. And Jeff did a great job, so go back and look at that on YouTube if you missed it, and that combination. But just understand that the turf irrigation is not going to apply the tree irrigation when it needs it and for the extent that it needs it certain times a year.
All right, thanks, Rock. Speaking of trees, Kevin, this is a Farragut, Iowa viewer who has hard maple, probably sugar, showing a lot of stress. Some of the leaves are small and yellow, dropping the smaller leaves. It's had this similar condition for the last 3 or 4 years. Trunk looks healthy. Any idea, or you want to comment real briefly on diseases of maples?
Yeah, like leaf anthracnose will show up, but typically we see that on the entire canopy, or maybe just the lower canopy, or inside where there's not a lot of wind. It looks like the damage on this tree is restricted to one side, one cardinal direction, and to me it looked like it was the side that was right next to the street. I don't know if they have done any construction lately, if there would any root damage would have possibly occurred, but that's what looks like looks like what's happening is that there's something restricting maybe the water or the nutrients on that side of the tree, and you're getting underdeveloped leaves. I saw a lesion or two on the pictures that were submitted, but that could happen as a result of the leaf dying. So if there are no visible lesions or cankers on the branches, stems, or trunk, it could be a root issue, and that's what it looks like to me.
All right, thanks,
I
Kevin.
don't know what to do other than just try to take care of the tree, I guess.
Right. Sarah, this is a Bellevue viewer who has a vine growing on a trellis. Cut back the clematis, and this one has taken over. She hasn't seen it flower or fruit. She'd like to know what it is, if we can figure it out, and whether it is poisonous.
I don't know exactly what this is, but it does look like it's something in the grape family. There are about 60 different species of plants in the grape family, aside from the common grape that we're familiar with. But if you look at the tendrils on those vines, those definitely look like they would be part of the grape family. So I think that's the right family. You might just keep it and see if it has any fruits in years to come, but it may not. It may just be more of a weedy type, and it may not be something that you want to keep.
All right, we have time for just a couple of quick questions here, gangs. So Shasta daisies, Fred, didn't grow much this year. She dug them up, and the roots are full of holes of Shasta daisies. Any idea on that?
Well, there are a number of flies that lay their eggs, and then the maggots will invade and cause some damage. So again, if the insects are gone,
Hard to tell.
yeah, it's hard to tell. Next year, if they see the same problem, love to see a sample.
All right. Fred, we had a viewer drop this off at NET, or Fred, sorry, Rock. I'm looking at the bucket and talking to Fred.
Thanks.
Brought us a bucket full of dead turf and dead spots in the turf. So do you want to maybe comment on that and maybe show one a little?
Well, I'll applaud the viewer, first of all.
Right.
And they brought this by the NET office. I don't know if we can get, it's full of these plugs, right? There you
Right.
go. Great camera work, I appreciate that. And as the viewer describes, there's a lot of dead turf on it. I wish we could tell the viewer what they want to know.
Right.
But there's not enough here to do any kind of diagnostic on it. The viewer probably had mentioned that, well, what's wrong with the soil? I'm not sure with what we've got here we can tell what's going on, if anything. So we want a piece of live tissue.
Right.
And send it to the diagnostic clinic or bring it in. We'll take a closer look at it, unless it's all dead, in which case you get to buy some seed and try over. But the soil feels a little compacted, but it may or may not be a soil problem. But we need the whole environment. Not and I applaud the viewer for as hard as they worked to get this to us. And
It's like buffalo grass is a bucket.
yeah, I think it is buffalo grass. But the bucket is. They're going to come back and get it, because otherwise I was going to take it home. So I applaud what the viewer did. We just need a more representative sample of healthy and not healthy, and maybe a little more description, because we can just qualify that it is dead.
All right, thanks, Rock. You have 20 seconds to talk about that,
Okay, we can do
Kevin.
it. We can do it. All right, I have a hackberry tree here, and it's got hackberry mosaic virus, and you will see things that look like this oftentimes on hackberry, where you have just blotches of yellow, spots of yellow on the leaves. If you turn it over and there's a gall, well, it's caused by a gall, but this is not. This is hackberry mosaic virus, and you can tell it's really blotchy. All of the lesions are angular. There's really nothing you can do about it. They're not really sure how it's vectored. There's no control. It doesn't typically damage the tree, so it's actually kind of pretty. It makes the plant variegated and looks nice, so there's really nothing you can do about it. Just enjoy it, I guess.